Hey, welcome to the Creative Marketing Cut, where we slice through the boring to bring out the brilliant. I'm your host, Evan Renfro, here to navigate you through the maze of marketing, creativity, and strategy. Our goal is to pack every episode with invaluable insights and practical takeaways for those of you who are ready to apply these tips. We'll skip past the industry stale dry jargon and uncover the crafty and creative side of marketing. And no, this isn't just a marketing podcast for those that are obsessed with marketing. This is for those of you who want a few tips on how to use it. Hey, Theresa, thanks for taking the time to chat today. I wanted to kind of start just hearing a little bit about your background, introduce yourself, maybe give us a 2-minute overview of who you are and what you do.
Sure. So I am a marketer, 20 plus years of experience. In that time, I have worked in agency. I have worked in-house corporate. I even did a stint at the Center for Entrepreneurship as a program director, working with businesses through some of their business challenges. So I have a long, very varied history. I have worn a lot of hats. Everybody who's worked in an agency knows that you cannot work in an agency without wearing lots of the hats. So I have done that. I everything from copy all the way up to big budget strategies. And so I know the whole breadth of it. As far as bringing it to this forum, I'm going to bring my best of my best tips and insights from a very wide career where I've been able to go deep in some different things. But I would say the big standout thing is lots of variety over the last 20 years.
That's incredible. Yeah, I did a little bit of research, and we've kind of gone back and forth a bit, but you certainly do have just a wealth of knowledge from experience and applied, strategies and different tactics and things. So, going from the different industries that you've worked within and the different experiences that you've had, as it pertains to content and marketing creation. What would you say kind of stands out in maybe even might be transferable between industries and between different areas of that?
Okay, well, this is an easy one. This is low hanging fruit, and that is people. This is Maya Angelou. People will always remember how you make them feel. And I have worked in industries where I was speaking to top 1% pharmaceutical execs, and I've worked in other industry where I have spoken to people looking for a job, through a career website. And I can tell you that both groups throughout time, they care about how you make them feel. So if you have the best, content writer in the world, then what they really are is a person that's able to understand feelings and communicate ideas that move people, move their heart, not facts. Not facts. I would tell you that does not make a great content creator. The ability to resonate, understand somebody's pain and resonate with that emotionally that transcends all things.
That's great. Yeah, no, I'm very biased. I'm a huge, I would say I'm in the camp of storytelling is king,
Yes.
right? So I
Yeah.
wholeheartedly agree with that. And I think we've heard it before. Like people buy an emotion, they justify with
Yeah.
logic, and like all the different things that kind of emphasize that. But that's incredible. I'm relieved to hear that because I don't have the same work history and experience across multiple industries. So to know that is consistent, and to know that is kind of like a common dose of utility that applies to each
Yes.
one of those. That's great to hear. And again, being very biased, I'm glad to hear that I'm on the right side of that belief.
You are on the right side of history with that.
Nice.
The reality is that to anyone here, like what your real superpower as a marketer is empathy.
Yeah.
That's your real superpower. That is your primary skill set. That is what you do. You are empathize with your target audience. You tell a story that solves their problems, and you bring them in this beautiful journey down to the emotional resolution of their problems.
That's great. I love that. Yeah, I think it's our. I would often say it's like our duty, right? It's our responsibility to be able to like communicate their challenges, their pain, their struggles, like,
Mm-hmm.
and to be able to articulate it and to paint that picture and to guide them on that story to what it would be like with those things solved, right? The solution.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, exactly what you said. I say it all the time as well. Like empathy is kind of that superpower. It's like that primary method of resonance with whom we're serving. And again, what better way to do that than with story? Kind of going from that, because I love that idea of like that being the glue that brings it all together. Like Many years ago, I was in fitness, and that's a much harder thing to sell, by the way, right? Like
Yeah.
someone's
Yeah.
uncomfortable and they can't eat the things they want to eat anymore. But we used
Yeah.
to have this little saying: it's like you got to hide the medicine in the sauce.
Mm,
And if you have kids, it's like, okay, we got to hide,
yeah.
whatever they don't want to have, we're going to embed it in something that they
This
do
is
want to have.
this is Mary Poppins, Evan. This is
Yeah.
Mary Poppins. A spoonful of sugar makes the
Yes.
medicine go down, right?
Yes.
This is Mary Poppins taught us this in a song. Yes,
Exactly.
that is
Yeah.
the truth.
A great story. Yeah. A great storied way of looking at it. And so I love that. And I think that, the reason I like it framed that way again is because there's like common buy-in, like around a shared interest or experience or desire. And so that storied framework of it, and then putting the thing that's needed, the thing that's necessary, embedding that within that vehicle of delivery, which is the story. If that's kind of
Hmm.
the framework that we work from, what would you say are maybe some, again, common, maybe they're applicable to multiple industries, but just some methods and tactics in crafting good story,
Hmm.
and communicating good story, whether it be short form, just copy, all the way to high production quality video.
Yeah. So, this is where content creation becomes science versus art, right? So I would tell you, if you made me choose, I think content is art first and foremost. But the actual execution of a content management plan and campaigns is very much science. It is very much math. It is very much plug in the formula and get out the thing at the end. So I would tell you that for me, I think understanding it as math and science is the first step in being able to execute it well. So I would tell you that, and this is where it gets nuanced, which is nuance is hard. It's harder to learn, but I would say that this is where it becomes nuanced. If you know your audience and you're writing them an email, there is going to be a cadence and a vocabulary for that audience, even though the big picture you're still conveying an emotion. The science part of this is to wrap that emotion up in a package that's most likely to get through their eyeballs into their brain. So and there's lots of research out there about this. Certain age groups prefer video, certain target audiences prefer long form. I used to work in a company where we dealt with chief human resources executives, and they loved a good white paper. They loved a good, long, lengthy, chunky white paper that they would print out and put in their briefcase and take on the plane. That was their target audience. Was I still using emotion and telling an emotional story in that 200-page boring white paper that no other person on earth would want to read? Yes. It was still emotion, but it was just presented in a different package, a package that I knew that they preferred. And the only way to know what they prefer is you can rely on third-party research, and there's a lot of people out there monitoring every click that a website gets. Right? They're going to tell you, hey, these people gravitated towards this content. They downloaded this more often. There's a lot of research out about that. I think a little bit of his gut too.
Yeah.
I think that once you climb inside of a company and you start to understand their product and their clients, you get a feel for what resonates with them. So I don't have I would tell you that there's no one format that's right. The right format is the format that's right for your audience.
Yeah.
And then so I would say the second thing that you need to do, which is part of the first, once you know your audience and you empathize with them and you fully understand their pain and you fully understand them, then the way appears. You see the way to reach them. Experiment. There's new stuff coming up every day, new channels. Every day we've got something new to conquer.
Yeah.
So don't stop testing.
Yeah.
Don't think, oh, I know my people. They like TikTok, because as soon as you do that, something else will come on the scene. So you have to constantly be, keeping your open mind. But yes.
That's great. No, I love that. And so I'm hearing, again, kind of some of these common themes, right? Like, you have to have empathy, and you have to know your audience, and you have to have a level of rapport. Otherwise, everything
Mm-hmm.
else is just kind of like done in vain, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
we could test and measure, but if we haven't started, at least from the
Right.
beginning point, with the right intentionality and at least the right
Yes.
directive, yeah, we're gonna be discouraged.
And this is such a challenge for marketers in general. So we'll just do a little empathizing with our audience here. The reality is that you land in a marketing role and everybody has high expectations for day one, but they hold off their judgments until day 30, which isn't a really long time to execute and get any kind of measurable change as a marketer, right?
Yeah.
But the reality is that, even when you step into a role and you've got those expectations of, where are my leads, which is what everybody hears, the reality is that there's homework that has to be done before you can write that first campaign. And a lot of times marketers aren't given the benefit of that time to do the research, to listen to the client calls, to connect with the sales team, to learn what they have to say. But I would say that is space you have to fight for.
That's good.
As a marketer. Nobody else in the company understands, like that literally has no value to anyone else in the company. They benefit from it once you do it.
Yeah.
But if you go to your CEO and say, hey, listen, I need 3 weeks, you're going to have to sell that.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to intuitively and instinctively know what the value of that is. But the reality is we know that is the foundation on which the rest of the architecture will be built. And so it is critical. And too many of us walk into companies. I mean, I walked into a 13-year-old company that didn't have ICPs written down. That work has to be done.
Yeah.
You can do it now, or you can go on a goose, a wild goose hunt looking, like trying to chase clicks and chase MQLs, but you cannot skip that work. That work has to be done.
Yep. Eventually you'll have to face it.
Yeah.
It's like,
it has to be done.
We serve 18 to 75 male, female.
Yes.
Yeah.
My favorite. And everything in between.
Oh,
That's my favorite.
Yeah.
We do this and everything in between. Oh, great.
Yeah.
That's so good.
Yeah. I mean, I learned that early on, right? It's like the fear is like you're shrinking your market size, but we know that if you're so vague, it won't resonate with anyone. And, you can't really tell a good story without anchoring it to something. It has to have some purpose. It has to have some reason for caring. And I think that that's something I've grown to really appreciate, because I kind of operate in this space where it's I've got the very rigid, objective driven marketing side of the brain. That's okay, we're trying to accomplish something. It's driven by a goal. It's driven by some objective. And then I let that really inform the creative side. And I found that working in that process helps me tremendously, because once the creative wheels get spinning, it's hard to slow them down. But I almost have to tell them what to do first, right? I have to kind of give them the marching orders, and it almost creates a bit of a framework, really, because it's okay, I know who the audience is. If it's client work, right? It should look like them. It should be on brand with them. Right. It shouldn't just look like a piece of content that I've created. So, who's their ideal market, or, who's their persona they're trying to reach, and what problem are they trying to solve, and all of these things that kind of inform it, at the most base level, helps to kind of really frame and shape the way that the content's created. So if it's story on the other side of it, the pain points, and the depths of someone that you're communicating to, and it really helps to kind of bring to life all the elements that would make a great story. And I'm interested to hear kind of your take on, because you've worked with large companies, mid-level companies, SaaS companies, you've worked across the board. You've had a lot of experience. And now is go-to-market is kind of your focus. Is that kind of where you've been? So I'd love to hear, what's the process like for something like that on really any of these industry types or sizes of business?
Okay, so here for a marketing person, if you find your company is switching to a more of a go-to-market framework or focus. Okay, you're going to reorg your teams to be more to go-to-market. And for the audience, I'll just recap really quickly what that change looks like. So go-to-market transformation for an organization means you've got marketing over here. Marketing's busy chasing their MQLs, right? Anything that if somebody glances at the logo, that's an MQL, because they're being judged on MQLs, right? So there's marketing chasing their MQLs, and you get sales in the middle, and sales is chasing the sale, because that's how they're going to get paid. So all they care about is, can I fit it into the hole and sell it? That is all they care about. And then you have customer success at the end, just trying to onboard people and hold on to them, right? That's the traditional framework. What go-to-market does is go-to-market says, you know what, guys, your MQLs don't matter if they can't be sold. And what you sell doesn't matter if we can't hold on to them. right? So the goal for everybody becomes, how can we put good people into the system so that they stay a long time and spend a lot of money, so that our actual revenue goes up? Because everybody here knows it does not matter if I give you $1 million worth of MQLs and you sell $1 million. If we're losing $1.5 million a month in churn, we're going bankrupt is the only place we're going, right?
Yeah.
So we have to grow that net revenue over time, or else the whole business goes under. So go to market is kind of just changing everybody's goals. You'll hear it a lot of times called a revenue. You've seen like change up to chief revenue officer. You've heard that, seen that. We're part of the revenue team. That's kind of that move to go to market is that way. So what changes for the marketer in that system? So now let's imagine we're changing from the old system to the new system. What changes for the marketer in that is we have to become better storytellers to our team.
That's good.
We have to bring that message in-house about what we're doing and why we're doing it. And we have to make sure that we are communicating that through the entire stream. And we also have to be listening through the entire stream. So it's this feedback loop in go-to-market that exists that we have to surf. We have to surf that feedback loop. We have to listen to everybody in the revenue team. We have to respond with campaigns that actually solve their problems and messages that actually solve their problems. And then we have to communicate the value of what we're doing. Hey, listen, we sent out this email campaign. It's targeting this person. This is where I'm expecting the salespeople to get these kinds of calls with these kinds of objections. Here's a hot sheet to tell you how to deal with them. And when you pass these people, when you pass them off to customer success, make sure customer success knows X, Y, Z about them.
That's awesome. I love that.
And that's just storytelling internally.
I love that it's not just exclusive for outbound, right? It's not just for lead generation. It's not just for brand awareness or grabbing more market share. It's for everything. It is internal. It is between departments to get on the same page and to really make sure everybody's rowing in the same direction. I'm a big fan, and I say this all the time with clients and prospective clients, and really. I'll say this too. Like, I try to make everything as simple as possible, just selfishly, because if I can understand it just at a most rudimentary, just base level, it's easier to implement, right? And that's like if there's a goal that's shared, if it's reduced down to its most simple component, then there's likely more alignment with that. Right. So I say that to say, like, I always try to just simplify it down. And what I often say to clients is I want aligned incentives, right? Like if we're after the same thing, like if we have aligned incentives, and that's everything from like, I've changed up the way that I price projects, like some people in my space will charge based off of hourly input or, like, I want to focus on the outcome. Like, what are we trying to accomplish? So if the scope and scale of what we do is based on the same thing, if we want the same end result, so kind of saying that with aligned incentives, it's not a matter of like everybody raising their hand, like, oh, that was ours. That was our lead. That was our work. It's like, okay, well, we want the same thing, right? We want to reduce churn. We want higher retention. We want higher client satisfaction. We want our, common story. We're all different characters within this season of this show, right? So we're all like, we're promoting the same, we're showrunners on the same show instead of like, a syndicate of like conflicting or competing things. We're kind of pushing
competing,
direction. Yeah. So I love
that's 100%. That's 100% the change that we have to make. If we are competing for that lead, which the current attribution model sets us up to have that fight. Yeah. And when you're setting us up to have that fight, sets us up to have failure. Yeah. So we have got to change. And it's not to say like, the pushback that I've gotten when I've had this conversation before is that, well, churn is a lagging indicator. Have you heard that before? Yeah. Like by the time this person that I've attracted with this podcast, by the time that they move all the way through the system, and I know that they've been a success, could be 2 years from now. That's too long to know if I'm doing a good job. Right. Yeah. So sometimes you'll get that pushback with moving to this common, everybody has a common goal. And I think that is the right term is lagging indicators. I think you can have indicators that are front end indicators. I think that how many people click on and listen to a podcast is going to be a leading indicator of whether the podcast was well received.
Yeah.
I think that number over time can be an indicator. I have personally had it where a live webinar that I didn't do that great the first time when we did it live, but 6 months from now, it shoots up because it happens to have a search phrase that hits and is popular at that moment. So I think that that kind of stuff where you've got that leading indicator, those are still important. This is not to say that marketing shouldn't have goals that are separate from sales. Yeah. It just means that those goals, they're not really goals, they're more leading indicators. My overall goal is still that net churn at the end, but I have leading indicators that allow me to have guideposts along the way to make sure, to try to hedge my bets that I'm moving in the right direction.
Yeah. It's funny. We kind of get into the weeds, and I'll say this, like, before, I admittedly know very little about many, many methods of tracking and measuring and monitoring. Yeah. Like, there are some people that are just light years ahead of where I'll ever imagine to be. And still, kind of maybe from my blissful ignorance, it's kind of like we get so into the weeds, tracking and peeling apart and splitting hairs and looking, and again, aligned incentives, right? I try to simplify it to its most core component. And I think that, like, it's silly to think, regardless of industry, if it's B2C, B2B, regardless, I think that, like, there are many variables that go into a decision, whether it's a purchasing decision or it's like, them retaining their services. Like, it's many things go into that. And I think that, like, they should be, again, like like an inclusive method of bundling and kind of wrapping around their experience in, like, multiple different points to make it better and hopefully retain them if they are the right fit for the product or service delivered, if it is solving their problems or providing them results. And it's like, again, I've said this a few times now, but it's aligning all of the incentivized, like, goals and the objectives around the same thing. And, like, for me, I've kind of framed it in my mind, at least, to where I look at them, personally, like with my business and trying to, grow and what am I doing that's working, as well as, clients that are measuring their things. It's hard to peel out or lift out just one thing and say, like, yeah, we're going to champion this and only do this, because if someone does, like, get immersed into your brand or your business, like, all those ancillary things or those adjacent things, they're going to help, like, really increase their buy-in, right? If something led to their purchasing decision and then they go and consume your free content, well, they're going to appreciate your brand even more, because that in their mind has, like, increased the value of what they've decided to purchase, or, why they've decided to become a client. And on the flip side, that could be something that brings in a new lead. So it's kind of like, it's very nuanced. I get it. And I'm probably oversimplifying it. And, there are people far wiser than myself, but
I don't think you're overemphasizing the need that we have to have a goal that brings us all together over something real. And at the end of the day, the only real thing is, did the company grow this month over last month? At the end of the day, when all the churn was accounted for. So I think I think you're on the right page for certain there. I think that when it comes to having indicators of whether we're having good performance, I think that's, everybody has to have their own benchmarks to keep themselves on track to make sure that what they're doing is valuable and moving the needle. The problem that we have, which is one of the big reasons why go-to-market is such, in my opinion, such a step up for all of us, for everybody in marketing. The unfortunate thing is we became so data obsessed. To your point, we became so, like, let me peel this down to its most infinite onion. Let's just peel it down to it's like, it's cellular now. Now we can't see the forest for the trees. And I think that the big loser in that system is marketing. Yeah. Because unfortunately, you cannot one-to-one attribute everything that marketing does. Marketing touches so many things that are fluid. It's like trying to pin down air. The reality is that what marketing does is not easily dollar in, dollar out counted. Sales is very easy to dollar in and dollar out count. Sure. You had this many opportunities, you sold this many opportunities. We all know how you did, for better or for worse. Yeah. For marketing, that just isn't the case for us. And so when you do reduce it down to that one-to-one, we're big losers. We're big losers marketing. So if we don't start to pull our vision up of what success is, then we lose all credibility with our stakeholders. So that is another, and we're speaking to the marketers in the house that have to go and have these conversations with their bosses. That is a tough conversation to have, that you must have, because it's, if you don't have that conversation, that, hey, you're not going to be able to see one for one everything our team is doing.
Yeah.
So let's just say, for example, direct traffic, organic traffic, right? I'm pretty much, I feel very confident saying that everyone listening to this, direct traffic and organic traffic are their two biggest sources, right? Just this big nebulous soup, and we don't know where it comes from, and we don't know what impacted it, right? And having that conversation of, I'm giving you, this is the soup. This is the soup. This traffic, this is a good example of, I'm hoping that we can see bumps in this number and attribute it to marketing. Here's my case for why that's probably true. We did a podcast, and for the next 3 days, the traffic was up to the website, direct and organic. Can I tie that with a very fine line together? No, but I can tell an anecdotal story where that stuff becomes impactful.
Sure. Yeah.
It's a tough road.
It is. And it's, that's often the case too, with trying to, like, people that are on teams, right? Like, they're doing it in-house. They have to justify, their work, right? The efficacy of the efforts. And, from an agency side, it's like really winning the new business, right? It's like, is this a worthy investment for them, or should they choose another route? And I used to just get so bogged down in trying to, like, justify and, like, plead my case. And now, as odd as it may seem, it's almost like I've had more success. And, it's not a sales tactic or some manipulation. It's truly how my mind has kind of reframed it. It's like, consider the opportunities that would be missed if you weren't to do this, right? And it's like, I think now where we sit, we don't have to convince someone of the value of content creation in 2024, right? We don't have to convince of, the value of video content, or, building a brand that has some sort of, like, personality, or, there's texture to it. It's not just this stoic, sterile thing. Do
you think the average honestly, do you think that the average CEO understands the value of that? Because I'll tell you what, I heard somebody say that the average CEO's understanding of marketing is like a 10-year-old.
Nice.
And I don't think that was meant to throw shade on anybody. They've got a lot going on.
Yeah.
And because I would tell you that if I'm a CEO, this is what marketing is up against, right? If I'm a CEO and I've got a big expensive department with a lot of headcount and a big budget, and they can't show me that when I give them $1, they give me back $1.50, I'm uncomfortable with that. Somebody's going to have to show me where that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I honestly don't think the average CEO does see that texture. Unfortunately, I do think that that's what we're up. I think that industry wide, obviously there are some that do, and hopefully sounds like you've got some clients that do, but I think across the board, there's a lot of, and rightfully so.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of concern over where that money is going and what they're getting for it. And that is valid.
Sure.
I am here to validate that is an absolute, they don't see your I can't even tell you the conversations I've had with people at that C-suite who don't I actually had this as a conversation. I'm almost going to give you a direct quote here. Like, somebody making fun of marketing, and they were saying that, oh yeah, my brand is somebody you want to have a beer with. You know what I mean? Like, they were making a joke out of that. But all that persona that we spend a lot of time crafting and making sure that we're having this consistent brand experience, they thought that was a joke.
Yeah.
That was ridiculous to them, that was even a thing. And I'm sure that they've experienced it and not realized it. I'm sure that they've enjoyed it and not realized it when other brands have done it for them. But within the context of our org, absolutely no value put on it whatsoever.
Yeah.
So that is an education.
Yeah, I can see that. And, I think there's a different level of responsibility and kind of required oversight, right? If you're captaining a massive ship, I'm sure there's probably this level of fear, right? And maybe it's
Oh yeah.
attributed to like fear of what you don't understand, right? Because yeah, if it's viewed as like child's play and like, oh, those crafty folk,
Yeah.
getting to hang out and have fun and
Yeah.
go on
Yeah.
the internet and
That's true. That's what they think for sure.
but we know, like you said earlier, it's a blend of the science and the art, and it's psychology, and it's all that's probably what I love most about this discipline is it's such a blend of
Hmm.
so many things, and you can get something. I view it as like curating, right? You can
Oh,
observe,
right. That's a good word.
yeah, because like I don't think we're creating something net new. I think it's just like fashioning and curating through our perspective and our lens of how we interpret something, and it's kind of like, oh, mashing these few things together has a unique output that really is calibrated with the thing we're trying to communicate. And I
Right.
love it for that reason. But I would say I can respect and appreciate the fact that that's not just like universal. Um,
Yeah.
I've never been CEO of a massive company, so I can't say from experience. But I'll say to that point
Even
too.
if you're a CEO of a startup, though, Evan, if it's your baby,
Yeah,
if your parents' money is in this business
yeah,
because they're backing you, you could be a business of 4 people. And I'm telling you that fear to give a marketer $1 and not know that I'm getting $1.50 back,
yeah,
there's going to have to be some trust built there.
exactly.
And I can tell you, no matter what anybody has told you, marketing cannot do that. Marketing cannot take your dollar and tell you 100% that we're giving you back $1.50.
Yeah,
It's just it's so I like the word curate, and I'll tell you why. Because I think that a lot of times, again, back to that example we used before. You're the marketer on day one. People are already asking you for those leads. Did you launch a campaign yesterday? Where's the leads today? Right? That's like common. And in 30 days, and in 60 days, and in 90 days, they have goals that you want to hit. Doesn't matter that none of the work was done. Doesn't matter that you're trying to retrofit, a brand persona onto a campaign that you're trying to do, right? Because I think and I think this is a really, hopefully, a big valuable takeaway to everybody. The current model tries to put everything in a very short term focus, right? Again, that's back to that dollar in, $1.50 out. You did this, it resulted in this. It's a very short term way of thinking. I like the phrase curating over time as being a marketing function because so much of what we're doing is we are carefully creating this brand persona. We're carefully creating this content and this storytelling. And it's not a one-off short-term thing. It is a carefully crafted, curated experience that has depth and breadth and it's not at all, what is it, maybe 30% of what we do is short term and 70% of what we do is curating this bigger brand experience for our buyers. So yeah, the word curation is actually a really good way to look at it. I like that word because it is not, and again,
yeah,
performance marketing. So what I would call
yeah,
performance
yeah,
marketing, demand generation, lead generation. Everybody's heard those terms. Those are short term. That's what did you do for me today? What did you do for me lately? What did it come like? That's
yeah,
where demand generation people and performance marketing
yeah,
people live, right? So
yeah.
if you're in that category, God bless you. That's a tough chunk, right?
Sure.
And I would almost say it's the most science based of the chunk, right? Because that's really science, all in that short term campaigning. But if you're talking about marketing overall and marketing as a whole, where performance marketing is part of the chunk, you know what I'm saying? Here's the chunk of what marketing does, right? In my opinion, if you look at the breadth of what marketing is responsible for, I'm saying like on an industry average, 30% of what we do is in that performance
Yeah.
chunk. And
I
70%
like
of
that.
what we do is in that
Because
curation, long
it's
term,
it's again, it's
forward
such a
thinking
tricky
chunk.
beast, right? Because it's almost like, we serve
And you
people,
have to sell
and
that.
people are complex beings, right? With an obnoxious amount of distractions and input and stimulus in any given day.
Yeah.
So we're hoping that we can carve out enough of their cognitive bandwidth that they decide to go with us. And even then, we're reducing it down to just that person as a client, and maybe
Right.
neglecting the fact that they could, I don't know, refer someone to us if they really understand our brand and really understand if we've done a good job with marketing it, even if they're never a client, but if they know
Right.
someone who
Right.
could be like, so again, it's like this whole, the totality of it. And
Right.
I think it fits really well. I love how you've broken it down and really in the
Yep.
percentages and the buckets, because Yeah, I don't envy that. Demand gen or like uh, you're only as good as your last at bat. What are you doing? Like that's not a world that interests me. I think like I gravitate.
Right.
What I do, I think, is
Yeah.
much more akin to like the branding approach, like marketing. That would be like a close cousin of branding. Yeah,
Yeah. Right. That's the Don Draper classic Madison Avenue advertising game. Like that's what we all think of. That
yeah,
what was the whole Dan Draper thing? What it was the whole Mad Men era was making
yeah.
people feel something, and never being able to know if it resulted in a sale beyond a very big
Yeah.
macro
Talk
view
about a
of the
lagging
of
metric.
the of the, hey, we
Yeah,
ran this ad and 3 days later people showed
waiting
up
for
for the
carrier,
sale. Can we
waiting for
connect that
carrier
one to
pigeons to run
one?
their lagging
We
metrics,
cannot
right? It's
connect
like,
that one to one. So we're taking a, huh?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So, that used to be the way that the game was played. And I have to say, like, I've worked in demand generation, I've worked in performance marketing. I have been the person watching the CRM and looking for those open rates to go up. And I have to say, there is something fun about that, but it is that sciencey part. It is that you love climbing into data reports and watching the needle move and getting back all that
yeah,
feedback and reiterating in a different and better way. Like there's something
sure,
I get those people.
yeah,
I get that there is an adrenaline rush to that. And if you like geeking out on the numbers and if you like that immediate hit of I did this, it resulted in this, there is something to be said for that.
yeah. I think that's,
There
yeah,
is
well
something to be
said,
said
because
for it.
it's like
It is a fun
it
part of
has to be
marketing.
considered,
It
right?
just
We
can't
can't
be
just
all of
like
marketing.
pie in the sky. Like there's no right. Like there's no like definitive metric. Like we can't operate that way. But yeah, I like the blend
Right.
and the balance. I love how you've broken it down. So I have again, I like to very 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 just radically simplify things. So I kind of have this philosophy, probably overly simplified, but it's like I
Okay.
would rather, and again, massively oversimplified, right? But it's kind of like I would rather create something that maybe has utility and value or has
Mm-hmm.
some sort of appeal
Mm-hmm.
and someone wants to engage with it and,
Mm-hmm.
and, and kind of create
Mm-hmm.
an inviting place that works someone through the buyer's journey
Right.
as opposed to hounding them and chasing them on the internet. Yeah, yeah,
But we got a topic here. We got a topic here to talk about because in my mind, that's the difference between inbound and outbound. Okay, so of the go to market motions that you do, one of them that you can choose is an inbound motion, or you can choose an outbound motion. There are several others, but let's just focus on inbound versus outbound because this is a little bit of a this is a topic that I've been thinking about a lot. So, inbound for me, which is what you said, you're creating an inviting environment to keep yourself top of mind, to provide value so that when the person is ready, you'll be top of mind when they go to narrow down the vendors. Or, as you said before, they'll be able to mention to their friend, hey, I'm not in the market for X, but if you're in the market for X, check out this company. It's like, so that to me is the beautiful picture that
yeah,
you've painted of inbound, right? What we consider outbound is that more going out and getting people, right? It's typically something that I think of as a sales function. Sales goes out and brings people in. Okay, so here's where we get a little controversial because our sales friends are not going to like this conversation. So salespeople, move away from the computer, take off your headphones. So I would tell you that in one of the ways that I think the pandemic forever altered marketing and sales and customer success. So how it was forever altered go to market. People
yeah,
now, well, first off, they went remote, they moved out of their offices. The
mm,
office phone is no longer sacrosanct. Right? The office, nobody has an office line anymore. Have you noticed that disappear from people's signature lines? Like that's gone. That's over. Guess what else is gone and over? Voicemail. Nobody wants to listen to your voicemail, right? So that happened. Okay, specifically, I think I think the pandemic definitely accelerated the demise of that. Um, I think that people now are more comfortable being online. They're more comfortable being in online communities. So when they go to buy something, the research is now telling us that 95% of that purchase journey is done before they ever reach out to sales, right? So 95% of that journey is an inbound journey. And I would say even that last 5% is inbound because the customer is reaching in and asking to talk to sales. So very much the journey is inbound. The idea of outbound, of picking up the phone and calling people that no longer have an office number, in my opinion, this is where it gets controversial, it's dead already. It's dead already. And nobody wants to hear that. I heard a really, again, bring in the controversy. I heard somebody the other day that said something that was brilliant, which is we just need to merge sales and customer success. By the time somebody reaches out to you and wants to sell, that should be the only person they ever talk to for the life of their journey. And I was like, that's prophetic. I think that's where we're going.
I like that. Yeah.
Controversial.
Yeah. No, I wrote that down.
Hot take.
I wrote that down. Like, literally the title, because from our pre-interview questionnaire, it's like I literally put hot take, and then beneath it I put outbound as we know it is over, and I put like, because that's from I'm glad you brought
that's a hot take. Nobody wants to hear that, and it's funny because I'll give you another tip. Watch the sales content creators, like people who are salespeople, and they're posting on LinkedIn and they're talking about sales.
Yeah.
I have noticed, especially even in the last year, if you read their posts, 90% of what they're advocating for the salesperson to do is marketing.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, like, they're using all the strategies and tactics of marketing.
You can call it whatever you want.
Yeah.
But that right there is marketing.
Yep.
And it's, so like I said, like even, and I think it's happening slow enough that people aren't noticing that it's happening.
Sure.
But the reality is that I've read a couple of posts now from thought leaders in sales, and basically they themselves wrote outbound a death. You know what I'm saying? Like everything that they told you to do was all inbound, and so yeah, hot take.
No, I love it, and I'm glad we touched on it, and I definitely have that on the agenda there. And I, again, I shared my bias toward this, right? Like my preference is to create and really I'm a big fan of like the give value in advance approach, right, to content and to marketing. Like really, you have to earn that rapport in my mind, and you have to be willing to and able to, either provide some sort of provide some sort of results or be able to provide some sort of utility and value without them ever having contacted you. So it's like,
right,
you're doing it from a place of expertise and authority, but essentially it's blind in that communication. Like you don't know them yet, but to your point, it's almost like, maybe we value autonomy much more. Maybe we're callous and have like a bit of we just don't like to be
comfortable.
Yeah.
I think during the pandemic, businesses got online.
Yeah.
And had to get online to make these purchases happen. And we got comfortable doing it all online. We realized it was better. I think it's actually very simple human behavior.
Yeah.
And I also think I don't think anybody wants to be sold to. I think that old school, let's all go to the Howard Johnsons and learn how to sell this weekend and then bring that home and sell people. And I think it's just old and outdated. Yeah. And like I said, go and look at some of those really smart thought leaders in sales. 90% of what they're talking about these days is basically that same inbound relationship building of setting trust with people, even if you haven't connected with them yet.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. And I think the last thing I'll say on it, because it's like, I don't really come from a place of like vast experience on the other side. I just have a preference to the side that I'm on in terms of where I spend my time and put my focus. But it's like, I feel that the one that can have the greatest level of exponential growth is an inbound approach. It's a content led effort. It's marketing, a vast array of value that someone can take and consume and become more integrated into your ecosystem. And the alternative, right, the more sales approach, the outbound approach, while it may have been effective for many, many years, like it's very much an eat what you kill approach.
Right.
As soon as that effort is stopped, like the return has also stopped. But you could put out a piece of content, like you mentioned, the webinar that kind of grew in like engagement over time, assuming that you put out something that's valuable, it can be exponential, right? And that one effort from that one piece of content, it could net multiple, returns over the effort put into it.
But and this is where we have to be careful as marketers too, because that is awesome when it works, but it is very expensive when it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So let me just so again, going back to that, it's empathizing with our CEOs and empathizing with our C-suite that's trying to keep the cash flow moving, to keep the business, the doors open. The reality is that if I pay a content creation team to create 1,000 pieces of content, which are now evergreen, right? It's out there forever, right? Yeah. But only one of them is hitting or two of them are hitting, I wasted a lot of time and money.
Yeah.
So I think that that's where we have to be really, really good at watching our science. Yeah. I had a friend recently who, did what every good content creator does, and they looked at their top 5 pieces of content, right? These are the ones that get the most hits. Okay, that's what we're going to call our top 5 most popular. The most traffic was coming to these 5 top pieces of content. So they were babysitting those top 5, right? They're loving them. They're giving them care and concern, and they're updating them all the time until they realized that buyers were reading a whole other different type of content.
Yeah.
Buyers were actually most interested in these 5 that were completely different than the traffic 5, right? Yeah. So once they had this epiphany that the buyers were participating in certain content more, then those became the most loved favorites. And obviously that is applying science to something to make it more effective. So I think that where a lot of content people are like, and I have to say, I'll say this too, I think AI can help us here. Mm. I think with AI, you can play more of a numbers game.
Yeah.
I can create 100 blogs on 100 different topics and see what sticks. And it's not the same bandwidth that it was even a year ago to create 100 pieces of content, right? So before I definitely could not be a spray and pray with my content topics. Yeah. Today I think that's going to be one of the more interesting things about AI is that you are able to play that numbers game a little bit, where a year ago even it was costly. So I just think it's content is evergreen, content is very effective when it's effective, but it also can be very costly in terms of like bandwidth, especially if you're scrappy and you're starting out.
Yeah, I like that kind of distinction too, and it's interesting that like kind of going back to the topic from before about understanding who you're trying to reach, right? And I kind of again in a simplified way, I look at like there's the vanity metrics, right? It's like how many hits or engagements or likes or whatever, but if they're not from the ideal person that I'm trying to sell or reach or serve, it's all for naught. Like, but looking at the flip side, if I understand who I serve, I've really taken the time to dive into this persona. I've really taken the time to like get to know, the adjacent things that they're interested in addition to what I'm providing for them. It's like, well, then you can do an A/B split test of sorts, right? It's like, I've got a couple of pieces of content, I think either of them are promising. We'll see what happens. So it's almost like, if you're a Seth Godin fan, he kind of has this way of framing. He's like, I made this, it's no longer yours, right? He's like, I made this for you, right? Like, and in the same context, people like us do things like this. And it's kind of that way of framing whatever's produced and created. And I love his approach of like, once you distribute it, like once you send it out, it's no longer yours. It's up to them to decide if it lands with them, if it resonates with them. And he's famous for saying like, people give him bad reviews on his book. He's like, well, that wasn't for you. And it's because he knows, right? He knows his audience. And obviously he's a super seasoned expert, but we can take something, we can glean something from that. And it's like, if we know who we're trying to create for, we can take those calculated risks of trying different formats of content or different, maybe taking a different thematic approach, but still within a realm of like, it's for that person that we're serving.
Right. Well, I also think that experimentation too, unfortunately, again, if we're talking, so again, imagine that everybody in the universe thinks of marketing as performance marketing, that performance marketing layer that we talked about, $1 in, $1.50 out, immediate returns, right? If we're focused on that, there is no room for experimentation, right? Because every dollar has to be accounted for. Yeah. So I would say that in my mind, experimentation is more of a budget-wide issue. So I'll clarify that. So like, experimentation should be something that you are funding at like 10% of your budget. Like, should be an overall macro number. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, 90% of my budget is spent on the stuff that I know that works, but I have to have that 10% to experiment with new formats and new ideas. And I think it has to be funded and accepted at that level. You cannot live on all experimentation, but you equally can't live on all performance, dollar in, dollar out. There has to be some budgetary and bandwidth wiggle room for experimentation.
That's good. Yeah, because I mean, at that point, you're able to kind of stay. You're growing and you're developing and you're progressing. Because even if you rest on your laurels of what worked, right? Selling Yellow Page ads probably isn't the most effective thing to do anymore, right? So it's I think continuing to iterate and improve. And I love that framing of like you've allocated a certain percentage of it to say we're comfortable losing this much.
Yeah, exactly.
The one that hits is going to be worth its effort.
The learnings too. I think that. So I've used this analogy before, which is, a lot of times, again, then that performance marketing layer, which is what everybody's focused on, right? Marketing creates a soup, right? We put all this great stuff into a soup. There's webinars in there and emails in there and all the beautiful, wonderful things that marketing creates is in this soup, right? And then we start doing our data analysis and they're like, okay, but what did people really like about the soup? Well, a couple people said it was salty. So then leadership says, okay, go back, add more salt, right? Not realizing that over-amping and over-indexing on this one little thing ruins the soup.
Yeah, that's good. I love
so I think that we have to, I think that we have soup and we have to accept that the soup is good, but we also have to be open to adding, again, in small doses, controlled doses, pre-planned, pre-agreed to doses, we have to allow for the experimentation of new things added to the soup.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and that's where I would frame up, like, again, like in my method, it's objective first, and then that informs the creative, right? That helps dictate the artistry of it, and that's effectively the packaging of it. So it's like how you serve it, how you plate the dish, right? It's like it's still that same meal, it's still the same menu item. It's what they ordered, but it's like, oh, we changed up the recipe a bit, like you said, or it's like, again, maybe it's got a different, like maybe it's accompanied by different things and it's just plated a little bit differently. So the experience is different, but it's still the same thing delivered. So if it's like we're looking for this to hopefully return something, to be an investment, we're looking for marketing to generate something, leads, more buy-in, more brand awareness. It still has as a net positive response. I'm interested. The last kind of thing I'd love to kind of dive into. I love how we went deep on a couple of things, and I love that. I think there's a ton of value in what you shared. I'm curious what your take would be. I know we kind of like, we really split and created a divide between inbound, outbound, marketing and sales, performance based, and then more of just like the whole of marketing. What would you say, for maybe those teams that are a little overworked, right? They wear many hats. They've got all the hats, and they are still up against those expectations, right? Like the business still has to, they're in business, right? They still have to produce a revenue. Like they still have to continue to grow. And, rightfully so, you're paid to do a job. It needs to have some sort of impact, some sort of result.
Right.
So, okay, if that's the framing of it, what are some maybe, base hits, right? Like we're not going to like bet the farm on this, but it's got the potential to kind of move us forward. What are those things that you think, maybe they're not universal, but maybe they apply to various industries and within what they do, like the application itself, it's manageable and it's attainable for someone to implement it right away?
So I think your low-hanging fruit is always going to be, if you want the lowest hanging fruit, if you want to get results fast, I think look at your existing customers for referrals. I think that's always the fastest, quickest way to move the needle. And it's underutilized. Despite having really good numbers, it's just not something that people think of when they think of marketing being involved in that end part of the game. And I would think the other thing that if you're really being held to moving the needle, and like you said, you are, You really want to spend 80% of your time on that 30% that's measurable, especially out of the gate, build some trust. And I think that you need to start telling a story that is long and short term internally. So I think when you go, I, I think when you go to those meetings with your stakeholders and your leadership team, the people that you're responsible to, you're bringing them two sets of numbers. You're bringing them two sets of objectives and tactics. One is short term. I'm spending 80% of my time here in this performance area. Here's what I'm seeing happening. But there's also those long-term goals. And then the idea is to eventually balance that out so you have what you think is for your business the appropriate amount of long and short-term initiatives.
I like that. And you made distinction between them where they're actionable and the return or the result of it is kind of a clear path. It's a clear cut path. So I love how you did that. Now I would kind of take the opposite approach, right? And
Okay.
maybe like, what are some of those like big swings, those home run swings? And then kind of like paired with that, what are some maybe new creative ways that you've seen? I know we talked about Outbound, basically coming to a close, right? It's as we know
In
it.
my opinion, yep. It's controversial hot
Yeah.
take, but yes.
Um, I validate your no. It's I agree. So yeah, I think as we see it, with this marketing bias. But so okay, like the big swings, the home run swings, the things that have potential to really move the needle, and then also like creative, new, interesting ways that you've seen be effective.
I think that I don't know that we're still calling video, short form video new, but I do think that's a big, powerful thing that a lot of brands haven't really invested in yet. I think a lot of times they don't invest in it because they think they have to buy a studio and $100,000 worth of equipment, which is not the case. I think big swings that are being underutilized are influencers, especially in B2B. I don't think we think of influencer campaigns. I think those can be big home run swings and again, underutilized. I think that I think that another big home run swing that a lot of people are sleeping on is organic social media. I think there are ways to make organic work with your paid that I think is a little bit underutilized as far as the kind of making those two a 1-2 punch. So I think there are definitely some big swings, a lot of opportunities out there that are happening, right now as we speak. But the same ones, the tried and true ones are all, I mean, I think email's completely changed. God, we could do a whole hour on that. I think that email has been forever changed, but I still think it's a good play done properly. And I think that, yeah, so those are some I think all the old stuff works.
Yeah,
I just think you have to do it, you have to be sensible about how much of it you're doing and how you're doing it, obviously.
that's good. I love that, and I think obviously, there's it's very nuanced and it's industry specific, and it's what are you providing, right? What are you selling? Some things are very well visually represented. Some things take a little bit more time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm biased,
Mm-hmm.
toward video, obviously,
Yeah.
and even like as of late, in the last 9-ish months, kind of accidentally stumbling my way into creating a micro SaaS, which is a whole new world for me.
Yeah.
Like I found that like even with that industry that's very tech savvy, obviously creating a SaaS product, like there's still a lot left to be desired in terms of the marketing content with, in my mind, like a void of creativity, right? If we're
Right.
kind of relying almost exclusively on screen recorded demos of a product, where's the story? Where's
Right.
the interest, right? You're expecting someone to care about all the features that
Right.
the developers or the engineers care about, and they should care about the results of them though, right? It's like, what does it do for me? Or like, where do I see myself fit into this story?
Right.
And I say that because I think that it's interesting. Like I knew less than nothing about, tech and SaaS and any of that, a year ago. I struggled to connect my GoDaddy domain to my Squarespace page, right? Like pretty pathetic there. But it's like there's consistencies with the different industries. Like I've done a lot of work for companies that are in the trades and the home services space, which is pretty easy to demonstrate an actionable thing, right? They're doing some sort of service. And then all the way to the other end of it, like I said, like SaaS, something that's it's all done with inside of the software. It's all done with inside of a technology. But I think the common thread and the point that I would make is like if we can tell a better story, like you said at the
Mm-hmm.
beginning, if we can tell a better story and really frame that connection and embed that empathy, I think it goes a long way. And I think that could be short form video. I think that could be creative ads. I think it could be what I refer to as like brand films that are a little bit more of like that dirty, gritty documentary style, the real life
Mhm.
version of who we are and what we do. But I think they share that common thread.
Yep, 100%. If that is the one takeaway that everybody takes from this, storytelling is alive and well, and it's up to us to make sure that those stories get told in a way that moves the needle. So I enjoyed spending this time with you today, Evan.
Yeah, I have as well. You've been a whole wealth of knowledge, and I greatly appreciate it.
Good.
I'm sure others will.
Well, we'll have to pick another topic and do it again.
Yeah, absolutely.